If the cause of death is written within 40 seconds of writing the person's name, it will happen. If the cause of death is not specified, the subject will simply die of a heart attack. After writing the cause of death, the details of the death should be written in the next 6 minutes and 40 seconds. One page taken from the death notebook, or even a fragment of the page, contains the full effects of the death note. The instrument to write with can be anything: cosmetics, pens, pencils, blood, or anything else. As long as it can write directly onto the note and remains as legible letters. Even the original owners of the death note, gods of death, do not know much about the death note. Those were the rules written in the book. I started to laugh. This is silly. This can't be true. Nothing like this could happen. What is this about writing people's names in a death note? What is this about specifying when they will die and how they will die? But even more importantly, what is a god of death? And so, as I carried the death note and read this, I didn't believe that this could be true. There's no such thing as a god of death. That can't be possible. That just doesn't make sense. But as I looked up, I saw something strange and heard something that I've never heard before. Yes, it was Ryuk, a Shinigami. Well, if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm talking about the series Death Note. Yes, see, fans of the anime genre probably already figured out what I was doing, and that was I'm reading the rules from the show Death Note. Death Note is a new Japanese anime that has come out and is now sweeping Western audiences. Now, the Death Note series is a strange phenomenon. There is something strange going on in the Japanese anime world, and it's not just anime. Strange animes have been out for many years. This isn't the first time Western audiences have been mesmerized by anime, but it has been often this concept that the strange and the supernatural of the Asian cultures are starting to spread towards the West. Whether we're talking about concepts from the Middle East or India or other parts of China and Japan, the concept of the supernatural and death and the underworld or the afterlife from the Eastern cultures are gaining more and more popularity and common knowledge in the West. And so Death Note is now here. Well, if you watch Cartoon Network, you see what they call Adult Swim, which is what the Cartoon Network shows at late night times. They have a new show that is appearing in English called Death Note. The Death Note is the story of Yagami Light, or as we say, Lighto. Well, Light is a character who is a brilliant student in Japan who finds a Death Note. And written in the Death Note are the rules that I just previously read to you. Now, based on this concept, Light goes through the personal dilemmas that we sometimes talk about so often on the Hot Conflict radio show. And today we're talking about the anime show Death Note. And so Laito tries to figure out how to use the Death Note for the right purposes. Now, he goes through the basic moral struggle. He realizes, after starting to use the Death Note, that its powers are real. And the persons whose name is written in this note, as the first rule tells us, shall definitely die. And so, as Laito figures out how to use the Death Note, he starts to think about what he can do with this power, this supernatural power. And as we talk about, when we talk about terrorism, the war on terror, the evangelical Christians, the extremist Muslims, or any other types of fundamentalists who get lost in the moral paradigm that is life, is, as always we know, with the power of the Death Note, like all great powers, comes great responsibility. And Laito tries to figure out what he should do with the Death Note. And like any moral person, he realizes that the Death Note is not a joke. It is not something to be taken lightly. It is not something trivial. The power to take another person's life is a serious matter. And so Laito starts with taking the life of criminals. He starts reading through the papers and watching the news, and people who are convicted of crimes or found guilty of major crimes, he starts writing their names in the Death Note. And as time goes on, he starts to develop a complex. A similar complex that people often get in the extremist mentality, where they start to assume that their view of the world and their view of the future and their understanding of how things should and ought to be is what definitely should be. And this causes Yagami Light to start to change the way he sees the world. He starts to think that he can rid the world of evil and build a utopia. Now, this strange phenomena that is played out in the cartoon is the same kind of mentality that we see from rulers or people who gain power and then start to abuse it. They start to view the world in their own image of what should and should not be. They start to imagine that they are the moral justification for all things, and that their reasoning is correct, and anybody who goes against them is therefore evil and corrupt. And that their imagery of what a proper world should be is the only correct answer for the future. Now, this is not something that we have only seen in anime concepts. As a Muslim, you can say that these same strange concepts are seen amongst extremist leaders in the Muslim world. That it is the duty for Muslims to eliminate all infidels, so that only Muslims remain. Now, this is a, frankly, juvenile, infantile understanding of the world. And anybody who goes through the process intellectually knows that this doesn't make sense. Now, the same can be said about Christian extremists or Jewish extremists, where they start to believe that the destiny of and the fate of the world must be by their hands,